We'll now introduce lesson 35 from Ross, which will have to do with first Yod verbs. Verbal roots that begin with Yod, according to the dictionaries, are actually of two types. Some were originally first vav verbs, in which the initial vav came to be pronounced as a Yod. Others were originally first Yod verbs, and the two will behave differently. Now you might ask, how do we know that these things were originally first vav verbs? If you go to a cognate language like Arabic, a lot of those have the same word in Arabic that will begin with a W as opposed to a Y. So anyway, the more common actually is the original first vav verbs. What will happen with them is illustrated with the chart of several verbs, yashav to sit or dwell, and yatzah to go forth, and yada to know. In the imperfect, you end up with a sere under the preformative, and with yashav you also get a e theme vowel. So he will sit is yashav, and she will sit would be teshev, and on down the list. You also get the sere pattern with the yatzah, where you get yitzeh, he will go forth. And then with yada, because of the ayin, you get a vowel instead of an e vowel, but same pattern. Otherwise, yada will be the pattern that occurs there, and you get the sere in front of the preformative in each one of these verbs. Now what's happened is that the original vav is back assimilated, and so the original IW, when you had originally a vav there, the IW has gone to a long E instead. Now in the vav consecutive forms of the imperfects, you will have the form yered, he will go down, and when you make it vav consecutive and he went down, the accent will recede, and then the vowel will change, because now you'll have a unaccented closed syllable with the red syllable, and that requires a short vowel, so it goes from a long E to a short E to accommodate that. And when you add a pronominal suffix to the end, that could also affect the vowels. So if you have ye, da'u, they will know, add the suffix who, him, or it, and you want to say they will know him or they will know it, the sere reduces the shavah, and then the vowel becomes a kamatz under the dalet, as it turns out. And so you can get some changes along those lines as well. A real common word is yakol, to be able, and it's truly irregular. It has its own peculiar pattern. It'll end up with in the imperfects with a u vowel, a shurik, and so you get you call, he will be able, and to call, she or you will be able, and on down the list there. Now, when we move to the cal imperative of these kinds of forms, the same pattern is going to work as we said before. If you take the second person, second masculine singular form, like teshev or tetseh, or the like, if you drop the T, or teda, if you drop the T of the second person form, that will be the imperative form. And so the imperfect second masculine singular of yarad would be tered. Drop the T, you get red. and te da becomes da. Te shave becomes shave, and on down the list, and te radi becomes radi, and the like. So whatever the second person form is in the imperfect, drop the T, and that'll be the imperatival form. Moving on to infinitive construct forms of these verbs. The infinitive construct form is going to be like some of the first noon verbs, where you're going to lose the preformative or the first consonant of the root, and you are going to compensate for that by adding a T at the end. So with your rod to go down, the infinitive construct is going to be reddet. And when you add the T, everything else is treated as if it were a sigilet noun. Or yashav, to sit or to dwell, the infinitive form, drop the yod, add a T, shevet, to sit or to dwell. Yada, you drop the yod, you add a T, and you get da'at as the form. And then when you add predominant suffixes to that, let's say you add my going down, well, this will behave like a I-class sigilet, and you'll get an I vowel here, and you'll get a read T. Same thing with shevet, but with the A-class, you'll get an A vowel, da T, my knowing. Well, what about the nifels of first vav verbs? And it turns out that with the nifel, you're going to get the vav to come back. You'll actually see it in most of the forms, unless it's written defectively. And so yalad, to bear child, if you make it a nifel, it would mean to be born, to be begotten, as it were. But anyway, the nifel form, you would have had a vav and some sort of vowel. Originally, it might have been an A vowel, owl, and the AW in certain forms, as we've already seen, that diphthong tends to go to a holem vav. And that's exactly what happens with the nifel forms. So you have no dod, he was born, and no lada, she was born, and on down the list, where you end up with the vav. So the yod disappears, but the original first vav actually shows up in these forms. Now, if you do the imperfects, the vav also shows up. Again, this is another indication, besides the fact that in Arabic you have walad. Walad is a verb that would be the cognate of this one, to bear child, would have a W. Well, you actually get the W. Again, in modern Hebrew we pronounce it a V, but originally it was a W, a wow. And it shows up, and the form is regular, other than the original wow actually appears. So you get yiv v'laid, for he will be brought forth or born, and on down the list. And the imperative, same thing. And the infinitive also shows the original vav. The same thing is also true of the hiphil forms, where with yarad, to go down, if you want to cause someone to go down, you'll get the original vav comes back, and again, probably originally the vowel was an A all the way through. So the hiphil, it was more like a hafel, which is the Aramaic form of the same thing. But anyway, the AW went to a holem vav, a long O, and so you get horid, he caused someone or something to go down. And the imperfect would be yodid, he will cause something to go down. And vav consecutive, same thing, except the accent is receded, and the vowel goes to a segol instead of a hierarch yod. The jussive is similar except with the sere instead of the hierarch yod. Coordinative again has all the way through though you're going to get the holem vav showing up in these hiphil forms. With the hafals of original first vav verbs, you will end up with instead of a holem vav, you'll end up with a shurik, an u vowel. And so the perfect of he was caused to go down would be hurad, and then the imperfect would be urad. Again, the original vav is actually there, although it has become a vowel letter, a shurik in this case, with the combination of the consonant and the vowel. Now it's possible to have a doubly weak verb, a first vav, for example, and a third guttural. You get this with the word yasha, which normally occurs in the hiphil, and it means to save. And so Hoshea is he saved, and again with the original first vav, the vav shows up as a holem vav in the hiphil. But then you also have a problem with the guttural at the end where you get the furtive patah. Same thing will occur in the imperfect. And again, the vowel changes in the preterite and the jussive. But it's possible to have both weaknesses operating at the same time, and they will kind of operate independently of each other as far as all that goes. We should mention a irregular verb, halak. Halak is a very common word, means to walk or to go, and in the perfect is quite regular. However, in the imperfect and the imperative and in the infinitive, it behaves as if it were an original first vav, and it follows that pattern. And so if you want to say he will walk, you get yalak, as if it were, again, that sere that you get in the original first vav imperfects, and all the way through the paradigm there. And the imperative, when you drop the T of the second person, third feminine singular, same as the second person, you just end up with a lek and add the other endings. And the infinitive is similar to, you add a T at the end, treat what's left as if it were a sigilate, and you get leket as your infinitive construct form. And with the suffix, in this case, you get segol rather than a hierarch, but nonetheless, you get lekti, my walking. And then if you add preposition la, it ends up with a lamed with a kamatz under it. The halak follows the pattern of first guttural verbs in its only occurrence in the nifal. And so it is somewhat regular in that regard. In the hiphil, halak again follows the pattern of first vav verbs, in which you get the holem vav showing up all the way through. So you get holik, he caused someone or something to go or walk, and yolik, he will cause something or someone to go or walk. Imperative, holek, you cause someone to walk as a command, and then molik, someone who causes something or someone to go or walk. We'll talk about original first Yod verbs in the next video.